In the golden dust of San Pasqual Valley, within a sanctuary built for wild and broken creatures, an adventurous German shepherd puppy wandered away from his owners during a hike near the refuge. Lost and confused, the puppy followed intriguing scents and unfamiliar trails, inadvertently slipping through a narrow gap in the sanctuary's perimeter. Kruger, an older bobcat known for his gentle yet solitary nature, immediately sensed the intruder. As the massive predator descended, silent as death itself, the staff could only watch in horror, bracing for the inevitable brutal end. But what happened next defied all logic, every law of nature. An act so unexpected, so tender, it sparked a journey that would test every rule and leave everyone who witnessed it in tears. What truly happened between the lonely predator and the lost puppy? The answer would change everything we thought we knew about the animal world. Before we begin, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story. The dust of the San Pasqual Valley, a fine golden powder, settled on everything. It coated the leaves of hardy manzanita bushes, dusted the roofs of animal enclosures, and clung to the brim of Arthur Finley's worn baseball cap. For 40 years, Art had been the steady hand, the calm heart of the San Pasqual Wildlife Sanctuary. At 72, his face was a roadmap of laugh lines and worry creases etched by decades of California sun and the countless lives, feathered, furred, and scaled, that had passed through his care. The sanctuary wasn't a zoo. There were no brightly colored signs, no popcorn stands, no crowds of noisy tourists. It was a place of healing, a refuge for the broken, the orphaned, and the misunderstood creatures of the American Southwest. A place of quiet purpose, where the main sounds were the rustle of wind through the sycamores, the distant cry of a red-tailed hawk, and the soft patting of paws on dry earth. At the heart of the sanctuary, in a spacious, rock-strewn habitat, designed to mimic the chaparral-covered hillsides of his birth, lived Kruger. Kruger was a bobcat, and a magnificent one. His coat was a masterpiece of muted earth tones, tawny brown, soft gray, and stark black, allowing him to melt into shadows. His tufted ears swiveled independently, catching the faintest whisper of a field mouse, and his eyes, the color of aged whiskey, held a deep, abiding intelligence. But Kruger's magnificence was tinged with a permanent melancholy. He had come to the sanctuary a decade earlier, his hind leg mangled in a poacher's trap. Dr. Evans, the sanctuary's pragmatic and brilliant veterinarian, had saved the leg, but it never healed quite right. Kruger walked with a slight rolling limp, a constant reminder of the cruelty that had stolen his wild freedom. He was a king in a gilded cage, and the weight of his crown was loneliness. Art and his small team, especially the young and fiercely compassionate zoologist Sarah Jenkins, did everything they could for him. They provided enrichment, varied his diet, and spoke to him in low, soothing tones. Kruger tolerated their presence with detached dignity, but he formed no bonds. Solitary by nature, his injury had deepened that instinct into a fortress of isolation. He would watch the world from the highest rock in his enclosure, his gaze distant, as if seeing a horizon he could never reach. It was a Tuesday morning in late spring, a morning so still you could hear the buzz of a hummingbird's wings from 50 feet away. The quiet of the sanctuary was broken, not by a crash or explosion, but by a tiny whimpering sound, so out of place it was instantly alarming. Sarah was the first to hear it during her rounds, her brow furrowed. It wasn't the cry of a kit, fox, or a coyote pup. It was domestic. She followed the sound, her heart beginning to pound a nervous rhythm. It led her down the dusty path, past the coyote rehabilitation pen, past the eagle aviary, and toward the far corner of the grounds, toward Kruger's habitat. A cold dread washed over her. The whimpering was coming from inside the bobcat enclosure. She scrambled up the observation platform, binoculars fumbling in trembling hands. She scanned the habitat, eyes darting from shaded den to sun-drenched rocks. And then she saw it. huddled at the base of Kruger's favorite sunning rock, was a small, trembling ball of black and tan fur. A puppy. A German shepherd puppy, no more than 8 weeks old. All paws and ears and terrified saucer-like eyes. And descending from the rock, silent as a falling shadow, was Kruger. Sarah's breath caught. Her blood ran cold. This was the nightmare scenario. A defenseless domestic animal. A baby, inside with a wild predator. Despite his limp, Kruger was still a perfectly honed killing machine. She fumbled for her radio, voice a choked whisper. "Art, code red at the Bobcat enclosure. There's a puppy in there. With Kruger." Art's response was immediate. His normally calm voice was tight with urgency. "On my way, Sarah. Do not enter. I repeat, do not enter. Just observe." Sarah couldn't look away. The puppy had flattened to the ground, a pitiful whine escaping its throat. Kruger was only feet away now, body low, movements fluid and deliberate. This was the stalk, the final moment before the kill. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the scream. But it didn't come. When she dared to look again, the scene before her defied everything. Logic, instinct, training. Kruger had stopped a foot from the puppy. His ears were forward, not pinned in aggression. His body was tense, but with curiosity, not hunger. Slowly, gently, he extended his head and nudged the trembling puppy with his nose. The puppy flinched, then whimpered again. Kruger nudged it once more, softly, inquisitively. Then he did something Sarah had never seen. He lay down, not in a crouch, ready to spring, but in a full, relaxed sprawl. Forelegs outstretched, head low, eye level with the pup. He let out a low chuffing sound, a vocalization bobcats sometimes use to communicate with their young. The puppy, sensing the language of peace, crept forward. It sniffed Kruger's massive paw, then, gaining a sliver of courage, licked his nose. Kruger didn't flinch. He watched the small creature with those impossibly old whiskey-colored eyes. A moment later, the exhausted puppy collapsed against the bobcat's warm side and fell asleep. Kruger laid his head beside the pup, silent, motionless, a guardian. By the time Art arrived, breathless and gripping a tranquilizer rifle, he prayed. He wouldn't need. He found Sarah frozen, tears streaming down her face. "Art, you have to see this," she whispered, handing him the binoculars. Art raised them, knuckles white. The scene was impossible. His experience screamed it was a fluke, a temporary ceasefire. It could all unravel in an instant. "It's a miracle," Sarah breathed. "It's a time bomb," Art muttered, though. His heart pounded with something unfamiliar. "Get Dr. Evans, we need to get that pup out, now." The attempt to intervene was a disaster, a moment that seared itself into the sanctuary's collective memory. Following Art's orders, 2 experienced handlers entered through the secondary gate with catch poles and a carrier. The plan was simple. One would gently divert Kruger, while the other scooped up the puppy. It was a procedure they'd rehearsed countless times. It had never gone so wrong. The moment the handlers stepped inside, Kruger was up. The gentle, curious creature vanished, replaced by a snarling, protective fury. He didn't retreat. He stood over the sleeping puppy, shielding it completely. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, vibrating through the ground. His lips peeled back, ears flattened, teeth bared. One handler stepped forward. Kruger swiped, razor claws gouging the handler's shield with terrifying precision. The message was clear. Stay back. The puppy, now awake and crying, was immediately soothed by Kruger's gentle licks. The contrast was chilling, soothing affection paired with raw menace. "Art, pull them out," Sarah shouted. "He's going to hurt himself or them. He's protecting it." Art saw it too. This wasn't territorial behavior, it was deeper, fierce, paternal. With a heavy heart, he gave the order to withdraw. As the gate clicked shut, Kruger calmed instantly. He nuzzled the puppy, quieted its cries, and guided it into the den. They vanished inside. The staff gathered in the small sanctuary office. The air was thick with disbelief. Dr. Evans, pacing, arms crossed, broke the silence. "This is untenable, Art," she said. "We can't leave a puppy in there. It's a violation of protocol." Disease risk alone is unacceptable. Kruger's a wild animal. One wrong move, a nip, a playful bite, and it's over. We'd be responsible for that puppy's death. Everything she said was true, logical, scientific. Art felt the weight of it. Then Sarah spoke, her voice. Did you see him, doctor? His face? I've worked with Kruger for 5 years. He's never connected with anything. He tolerates us, endures his life. But today he was alive. He was protecting that puppy. He's adopted it. I know it sounds crazy, but he has. She turned to Art, her eyes pleading. And what about Kruger's mental health? He's been a ghost for years. This is the first time I've seen him look happy. If we take that puppy away, what will it do to him? The room fell silent. They were caught in an impossible dilemma. The safety of the puppy versus the well-being of the bobcat. Protocol versus a miracle. Art leaned back in his creaky office chair, the wood groaning under the weight of his decision. He looked out the window at the distant sun-baked enclosure. He thought of Kruger's lonely silhouette on the rock, day after day, year after year. He thought of the fierce, desperate protectiveness he had just witnessed. It wasn't the act of a mindless killer. It was the act of a father. "We'll name the puppy Scout," he said quietly, his voice raspy. The others looked at him, stunned. Because he somehow managed to scout out the one place, the one animal, in this entire valley that needed him the most. He looked from Dr. Evans's worried face to Sarah's hopeful one. "We'll set up a 24/7 watch, a live video feed to this office. We'll have the vet team on standby. We'll do a remote fecal analysis on the pup as soon as we can get a sample, test for everything under the sun. We'll prepare a specialized diet and find a way to deliver it so they both get what they need. We'll take every precaution imaginable." He took a deep breath. "But for now, we let them be. We watch, and we pray we're doing the right thing." The days that followed were a masterclass in unlikely tenderness. The story of Kruger and Scout became the sanctuary secret, a fragile bubble of wonder they protected fiercely. The live feed in Art's office became the most watched channel in the world for the small team. They watched, mesmerized, as an old, crippled bobcat taught a clumsy German shepherd puppy the ways of the wild. Kruger was an astonishingly patient father. He would let Scout clamber all over him, nipping at his tufted ears and batting at his bobbed tail. When the puppy's play became too rough, Kruger wouldn't retaliate with tooth or claw. He would simply pin Scout gently with a large paw, holding him until the puppy calmed down, then release him with a disciplinary lick on the nose. He taught Scout how to stalk, a great lumbering German shepherd puppy trying to mimic the silent, fluid grace of a bobcat was a sight of pure, heartwarming comedy. Scout would bunch up his hindquarters, wiggle his rear end with comical intensity, and then spring forward, landing with a loud, clumsy thud that would have scared off any real prey for miles. Kruger would watch with what looked suspiciously, like amusement, then demonstrate again. His own movements a silent poem. In return, Scout taught Kruger how to play. He brought a joyous, boisterous energy to the quiet enclosure. He'd fetch sticks and drop them at Kruger's paws, looking up with expectant eyes until the bobcat, after much feigned indifference, would deign to bat the stick once or twice. He taught Kruger the uniquely canine language of the play bow, a signal the bobcat seemed to understand, and on rare occasions would even reciprocate with a clumsy version of his own. Their sleeping arrangement captivated everyone. Every night, without fail, they would curl up together in the den. The tiny puppy nestled against the bobcat's warm belly, rising and falling with his steady breath. As Scout grew, the positions changed, but the closeness remained. Soon, a lanky adolescent dog was spooning a full-grown bobcat, Scout's long leg draped protectively over Kruger's back. Dr. Evans's team managed to get the samples they needed. Miraculously, Scout was healthy, just a lost, hungry puppy who had likely wandered away from a nearby farm. They devised a clever feeding system with separate bowls that Kruger surprisingly respected, ensuring Scout got the high-protein puppy food he needed to grow. As Scout transformed from a roly-poly puppy into a handsome, well-muscled young dog, a new reality began to set in. He was now significantly larger than his adoptive father. His youthful energy was boundless, while Kruger, entering his twilight years, was slowing down. The games of chase were more one-sided now, with Kruger often retiring to his rock to watch Scout's enthusiastic laps around the enclosure. The love was still there, visible in every shared glance and gentle nuzzle. But the sanctuary staff knew a difficult conversation was on the horizon. The San Pasqual Wildlife Sanctuary was no place for a large, healthy domestic dog to live out. His life, it wasn't fair to him. He needed more space, more interaction with his own kind, and a purpose that went beyond being a bobcat's companion. The thought of separating them was a fresh wave of heartache for the staff who had become so invested. It was Sarah who found the solution. Her grandmother had recently moved into a senior living facility called Golden Meadows. During a visit, Sarah had watched a therapy dog make its rounds, seeing firsthand the immense comfort and joy the animal brought to the elderly residents. She saw the way their faces lit up, how they would talk to the dog, stroking its fur, their loneliness and pain seeming to melt away for a few precious moments. And she thought of Scout. He had been raised with a quiet gentleness by the old, patient Kruger. He was used to moving slowly, to being a calm presence. He wasn't boisterous or jumpy like other young dogs. He had a deep well of empathy that seemed to flow from his improbable upbringing. He had learned the art of quiet companionship. She proposed the idea to Art, her voice trembling slightly. "He's a therapy dog, Art. He's been in training for it his whole life without us even realizing it. He learned how to be gentle and comforting from Kruger. He could bring so much happiness to people." Art listened, his gaze fixed on the monitor where Scout, now a full-grown, magnificent dog, was resting his head on Kruger's flank. Separating them felt like tearing a single soul in two. But Sarah was right. Scout deserved a life of his own, a purpose, and the love he had received in this enclosure was too powerful to be contained. It needed to be shared. The director of Golden Meadows, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Gable, was initially skeptical when she heard the story. A dog raised by a bobcat? It sounded like a tabloid headline. But then Art and Sarah showed her the videos. They showed her Kruger's gentle grooming, Scout's patient companionship, the undeniable bond of love between two impossible friends. Mrs. Gable was moved to tears. She agreed to a trial visit. The day they took Scout from the enclosure was one of the hardest in the sanctuary's history. There was no way to explain it to either animal. Scout whined in confusion as Sarah clipped a leash to his collar for the first time. Kruger paced frantically, his guttural cries echoing through the valley. It was a heart-wrenching sound, a cry of pure loss. As the van pulled away, Scout pressed his face against the rear window, his eyes locked on the frantic figure of the bobcat growing smaller and smaller in the distance. The entire staff felt like villains. Scout's first few days at Golden Meadows were tentative. He was withdrawn, clearly mourning his lost companion. He would lie by the door of his room, waiting. The residents were patient. They would sit with him, talking to him, not demanding anything. An elderly man named George, a retired Army colonel who rarely spoke, began to visit him daily. He wouldn't try to pet Scout. He would just sit in a chair beside him and read the newspaper aloud. On the third day, Scout let out a deep sigh, got up, walked over to George, and rested his head on the old man's knee. George stopped reading, and his wrinkled hand came down to stroke Scout's head. A single tear rolled down the colonel's cheek. From that moment on, Scout's true calling began. He wasn't just a dog. He was a conduit for the love he had been given. He seemed to have an innate sense of who needed him most. He would lie quietly at the feet of a woman grieving her late husband, offering a silent, warm presence. He would nudge his ball into the hand of a resident recovering from a stroke, encouraging gentle movement. He would sit patiently while a woman with Alzheimer's, who couldn't remember her own children's names, would tell him stories about a dog she had as a little girl, stroking his soft ears. He absorbed their loneliness, their pain, and their memories. and in return he gave them the unconditional, non-judgmental love he had learned from a wild cat in the hills of San Pasquale. He became the heart of Golden Meadows. But the story doesn't end there, because love like that doesn't end. It just changes shape. Art had made a promise to Sarah and to himself. Every Sunday, Sarah would drive the sanctuary's van to Golden Meadows. Scout, who now seemed to know the routine, would be waiting eagerly by the door, his tail thumping a joyous rhythm on the floor. He would hop into the van, and they would make the journey back to the dusty sanctuary, back to the place of his strange and wonderful puppyhood. The moment he was let out of the van, he would race toward the Bobcat habitat. And inside, Kruger, who would have been waiting restlessly all morning, would be at the fence. When the gate was opened, the reunion would leave everyone who witnessed it in tears. Scout, the big, powerful German shepherd, would lower his head in deference, whining with happiness. Kruger, the aging Bobcat, would rub his face all over Scout's neck and chest, chuffing and purring with an intensity that vibrated through the air. They would fall into their old habits as if no time had passed. They'd walk the perimeter of the enclosure together, side by side. They'd lie down on the sun-drenched rock, Scout's large body now a warm, protective barrier for the old Bobcat who had once protected him. Art and Sarah would watch from the platform, their own eyes wet. They saw the truth before them, a love that defied species, defied logic, and defied expectations. They had taken a risk, a leap of faith based on a single impossible observation. They had chosen compassion over protocol, and the result was a ripple of warmth that had spread from a lonely Bobcat to a lost puppy, and from that puppy to a community of lonely souls. Scout had found his purpose, bringing comfort to the elderly, paying forward the gentle love he had first received, and Kruger, in his final years, was no longer the lonely king in a gilded cage. Every Sunday his boy came home. He was a father, a friend, a mentor. He was loved, and in the quiet of the San Pasquale Valley under the warm California sun, that was more than enough. It was everything.